you been watching a lot of forensic YouTube videos like I have and noticed that a lot of the times the offenders in the videos are referred to or labelled as narcissists? Well, I want to talk about that today. It seems to be all the rage these days to call everyone a narcissist just because they have some abusive traits or some selfish tendencies. But if you're someone trying to determine whether a person you know or you're with is a narcissist or just abusive, then this is the right video for you. Usually I don't debate too much over semantics, over words that are used, especially when they're quickly describing a set of behaviours and convey meaning. If someone says they're with a narcissist or they're with an abusive person, that's not time to squabble over definitions. We know what they mean. But in some instances, I think it's a mistake to call narcissists abusers and vice versa. And that's because, well, simply it isn't true. There just isn't evidence for that. The majority of people that I've worked with in the prison system for DV are not narcissists, not by the diagnostic definition anyway. And the majority of men that are arrested for domestic violence towards women are not narcissists. Abusers are statistically no more likely than non-abusers to have a diagnosis of NPD, of Narcissistic Personality Disorder. However, abusiveness can look a lot like narcissism, and it is important to lay out the differences so that those being victimized by either can understand what's happening and best manage it. Another important difference is that abusers tend to learn their abusive behaviors from other men in their lives. Sometimes their fathers, but not always. Whereas narcissists are much more inclined to have some sort of pathological history with their mothers. But this is certainly not absolute and it's not foolproof, but it does tend to be what I see in a lot of forensic cases. Another difference is generalized or focused behavior. So with NPD, with narcissistic individuals, they behave in a way that seems to affect every area of their life and all their relationships to some extent. Whereas abusive individuals without NPD usually act out of poor self-control, bad temper, emotion dysregulation, or simply just not getting their own way. They're also more inclined to abuse more covertly and more likely to target specific people in their life, most commonly their partner, their children, and or their pets. The fourth thing I want to bring to your attention is that abuse is not a mental health condition. It's a behavior, it's a choice. And my concern in calling abusers narcissists is that it tends to present a mental health diagnosis, an excuse, or at the very least, a reason for these behaviors. Abusers need to be known as abusers. They need to be held responsible for the things they do, for their actions, so that their behavior is not mitigated by some kind of label or illness beyond their control. It certainly is in their control. It might not be easy, but ultimately it is a choice. And even for the small percentage of abusers who might also have NPD, they are still abusers. So we need to hold them to account. And to me, this is a very important point. But commonalities do exist. And I think it explains why a lot of people confuse the two. But be they abusers or be they narcissists, both seem to want control, they want power, they want to be in charge of a situation or another person. And they both may display signs of intense jealousy, intense affection, which we call love bombing, and they both seem to play a lot of mind games, particularly in the way of making the victim think that they're responsible, that they're at fault. But when you're familiar with these kind of peoples, when you're familiar with the profile and the predictable patterns in which these behaviours occur, you can do something about it. But sadly, the other thing that's predictable is the behaviour of the victim. And this predictable behaviour of the victim also gives us understanding and insight into why a lot of victims will stay in these kind of relationships. they will often believe the buyback phase, which is the love bombing, the part where the offender wins them back, wins their trust and their love back with sweet words or gifts or promises. And the victim may also be unaware of some of the more subtle subterfuge that goes on in these kind of relationships, where they're being grossly manipulated in a very covert way with little things, but on a day-to-day basis, so that in a way their whole reality becomes distorted. So to summarize and make this a little bit more memorable and something you can refer back to, I'm going to show you a table, a graphic, which will have a look at the differences between an abuser and someone with narcissistic personality disorder. And you'll see that an abuser is more likely to have targets for his abuse and can go from hot to cold when and it mainly is a male dominant behavior. So I say he for clarity, but we know nothing is absolute. So when he loses or thinks he's losing control or being emasculated. The big thing to notice on this chart is the bottom row down here and whether there is possibility of positive change. Again, nothing is concrete here, but the research and certainly my experience suggests that these behaviors are very difficult to change. But for narcissists, change is even less likely, if not next to impossible. Whereas the abuser, should they have motivation, accountability, and willingness to engage in, and I would say professional help or specifically designed programs, they may show progress. But it is not the responsibility of the victim to hang around and hope that the outcome is positive. If you are in an abusive relationship of any kind, if your autonomy, your power, your thoughts, your whereabouts, your safety is being compromised or controlled, this is not the time to be watching this video. It's not important for you whether the person doing this is a narcissist or an abuser. It's time for you to seek help. It's time for you to protect yourself, your children, and learn about the predictability of an abusive person's behavior, because it is predictable. And it's important to know this so you can find a way to safely leave the relationship. We know the most dangerous times for a woman to leave an abusive relationship is when she's planning to leave. So ensure you have consulted with someone or you've educated yourself on these variables, on these factors. And of course, if you are in imminent danger, then you shouldn't hesitate in contacting emergency services in your country. Remember, narcissists and abusers have no place in your life. You should not create space for them. They are not your problem to fix, and they are not your responsibility, and it is not your fault that they act that way. But what about when the abuser or the narcissist is a parent? What then? Well, I'm going to make a video separately for that. I'm going to call it How to Say No to a Narcissistic Parent. And I'm going to address that separately, because I think for children it is a different set of rules, especially if they don't have someone else there to help them. But I hope this today helped you question if your abuser is a narcissist, especially with all the content that is out there, all the misleading information that is on social media. It seems everyone is a narcissist these days, and it simply isn't the case. You can be selfish and abusive without having a diagnostic mental health condition or a personality disorder, as is the case with narcissism. But let's hold abusers to account and stop finding excuses for their behavior.